So today we're going to talk about chapters 1 and 3. We're going to look at the history and trends in the school counseling profession, and we're also going to look at some equity of access in school counseling. So taking you back to the very beginning of school counseling and where it came from is if you think about vocational guidance is where it really started, and you have one word for that, and that is Sputnik. If you know anything about Sputnik, so Sputnik was the space shuttle that the Russians put up into space, and after that, the Americans got really nervous about our kids and our students and wanted to say we wanted to be competitive in our space program and be competitive in the world market. And so you might have heard the term Frank Parsons. Frank Parsons was kind of who developed the three-step approach to vocational guidance, and that's where this all began. And when you think about where most school counseling programs began, it began with vocation guidance and Frank Parsons. There was also a group of people who really started looking at the humanistic side of children in schools and kind of thinking about how are students reaching self-actualization. And you might know of the name of Carl Rogers, who is a great theorist, person-centered theory. And a lot of school counselors, there was this really interesting role confusion in the early stages of school counseling where you had a lot of people coming on board who wanted to really get kids ready to move into post-secondary processes. And then you had people who wanted to really be mental health therapists to children in school settings. And you'll still see today those same types of role confusion. So the next group are the integrators. These are the people that really started to see that it's not just about either or. It's not just about career. It's not just about social emotional learning. It is about all of those pieces together, the academics, the career readiness, and social emotional learning. And that really kind of put the three-prong approach for school counseling today. If you look at professional identity through school counseling counselors are still struggling with professional identity. We're not quite clinical mental health counselors, not marriage and family counselors, or not necessarily, you're not a teacher. So you really are kind of have a foot between these two areas. You have a mental health group, and then you also have the educational group. And there's a lot of question around, are you a counselor who works as an educator, or are you an educator that works as a counselor? And that question is kind of that chicken or egg question. It's a hard one to determine the truth. Let's read that. The next part is, like I said, the career guidance is under pupil personnel services. And probably in the 30s and 40s, again, the focus was more on that vocational development. You'll see in Pennsylvania the title changed from guidance counselor to school counselor in the early 80s and has not been a part of your CSPG, which is the overarching document that the Pennsylvania Department of Education uses for certification, not licensure, in the state of Pennsylvania. So in the 80s and the 90s, you really saw the professional school counselor come around, comprehensive school counseling. The ASCA national motto was developed around 2000s, early 2000s, and that really started to create that paradigm of what a school counselor should be doing, spending their time on. So here's some role clarification slides, just really talking about the different organizational systems, preventative programming. You kind of went through a period in the early years where school counselors were very vocational driven. Then we got to a period where it was very mental health, social emotional driven, and now in these the 90s and thousands and 2010s, you'll see that we're trying to really balance all of those different things that are on a school counselor's plate. We really started to also look at achievement gaps, especially with children in poverty and children of color. We really started to look at equity of access for programming and opportunities, really looking at data to support the things that we're doing in schools and making sure that we provide opportunities for all children regardless of who their families are. So there's a lot of interesting things here regarding social and political influences on school counseling. I'd encourage you to read your book for more information. Like I said, during World War I, some of the intelligence testing, and that's where that early ASVAB testing came from, and that kind of started to really look at how school counselors use testing to help students make decisions regarding their academics and career goals. So again, you can see the focus was on vocational education. The National Vocational Guidance Association was first established, and then it quickly became evolved itself into the American School Counselor Association, which is the national organization for school counselors. We have a state association, the Pennsylvania School Counselors Association, which has been around since the early 1950s, and has been the School Counselor Association, which is kind of interesting. So again, back into the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of social and political influences, a lot more social emotional learning, and really mental health counseling. A lot of school counselors were coming in to the field not from a teaching perspective, but from other areas where they had to, from mental health or from agencies and things like that. So I'll let you read that in your book too if you want to read about the ADA and FERPA. Those are all laws that kind of came about that really influenced school counseling. The biggest thing that's been happening in this country, and especially in Pennsylvania over the last couple of years with Barack Obama, his wife, Michelle Obama, developed what's called Reach Higher and Better Make Room, which was very focused on getting students ready for college and opening that equity of access and opportunities for children of all ages and color and of all ethnicities, of all poverty levels. So a lot of, especially a focus on first-time college goers in families, and really allowing for information to be given to students so they didn't just assume they couldn't go to college if they wanted to. So that was kind of a big push maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. She's actually honored the School Counselor of the Year in Washington for her last 2 years of her Barack Obama's presidency, and she still has Better Make Room and Reach Higher as her initiatives that she continues to follow for students. So it really kind of boosted school counseling, put us into the limelight, and people were paying attention. The state of Pennsylvania has recently been looking at school counselor ratios. There are 2 legislations on the table right now which would give school counselor mandation and ratios. Just in case you didn't know, school counselors in Pennsylvania are not mandated K-12, and there is no ratio. So for example, in some states such as West Virginia, school counselors are mandated, and they do have a specific ratio. So after 1 to 350, I don't know if that's positively sure, but just example, anybody over 350, another school counselor has to take that group of students. So there is that kind of legislation is happening currently, and we'll talk more about that in our discussions. I kind of already went over this. Let you read over that. A lot of that's in your book. NASCA, again, has, I would encourage you, if you're going to join a association, to join NASCA. There's a lot of great publications, materials, journal articles, pretty much anything you need to know about school counseling is on the NASCA website. So some schools are K-CREP accredited. We are not here at St. Vincent. K-CREP accreditation happens for students who go through a 60-credit course program, and yours is only 39, so you are not K-CREP accredited, which also means that you could not get your NCC certification or become licensed in the state of Pennsylvania as an LPC. To be an LPC, you have to have 48 credits of coursework and take the NCC exam and do supervision hours. In this program, you have 39 credits, and you can't add credits, so it has to be the accreditation of the program. So if that's something that you thought you were going to be doing, you need to see me directly. So that's really it for school counseling professions paradigm shift. And you can see just really the things that have been going on across the years for school counseling. And we are in a really great place right now as school counselors, especially in Pennsylvania, to provide services for our kids.